Welcome to another gripping episode of Whispers of the Guilty, where we dive deep into the shadows of true crime to bring you the most chilling tales of intrigue and darkness. I'm your host, Silence, guiding you through the twisted paths of the criminal mind. Today, we unfold the sinister saga of Richard Ramirez, infamously known as the Night Stalker, whose reign of terror kept Southern California on edge during the mid-1980s. Prepare yourselves as we step into a story not just of a man, but of a monster whose brutal crimes tested the limits of human fear and endurance. Join me as we explore the dark journey of the Night Stalker, from his disturbed upbringing to the chilling spree of violence that led to one of the most frenzied manhunts in U.S. history. We'll uncover the harrowing details of his heinous acts, the desperate pursuit by law enforcement, and the courageous community that rose to capture him. So, lock your doors, check your windows, and settle in as we delve into the darkness of the human psyche with the story of Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, right here on Whispers of the Guilty. Stay tuned, stay safe, and remember, evil walks among us. In the summer of 1984, Southern California was cloaked not only in the typical balmy weather that defined its climate, but also in a palpable layer of fear that clung to the region as tightly as the humid air. It was a fear so profound that it seeped into the lives of every resident, each night bringing a suffocating dread that dusk could herald horror. This terror had a name, though not yet known to the world: Richard Ramirez, who would soon be infamously dubbed the Night Stalker. Ramirez's early life in El Paso, Texas, painted a portrait of a troubled youth marred by exposure to extreme violence and deprivation. Born on February 29, 1960, the youngest of 5 children, his childhood was fraught with difficulties. His father, a former police officer turned laborer, was known for his volatile temper, often leading to physical abuse. This harsh discipline was perhaps an early factor in the fracturing of young Richard's psyche. Moreover, his exposure to gruesome tales of violence from his cousin Miguel, a decorated Green Beret who served in Vietnam, introduced him to a world where brutality was almost celebrated. Miguel's stories were vivid and visceral, detailing the gore and glory of combat, which captivated and corrupted Ramirez's impressionable mind. The pivotal moment, however, was witnessing Miguel fatally shoot his own wife in a fit of rage, a traumatic spectacle that Ramirez observed at just 13 years old. These formative experiences were compounded by Ramirez's health issues, including severe epilepsy which began in his childhood and persisted into his adolescence. The seizures isolated him socially and academically, pushing him further towards the margins of society. Delving deeper into an isolated existence, Ramirez found solace in darker interests, including an affinity for heavy metal music, with lyrics that often glorified death and Satanism. This attraction to the macabre was accompanied by an escalating drug use, primarily marijuana and later cocaine, which clouded his judgment and fueled his burgeoning delinquency. As Ramirez drifted into his teenage years, his behavior grew increasingly erratic and detached from societal norms. His frequenting of the local cemetery, where he would smoke marijuana beside the graves, was emblematic of his dive into darker fascinations, particularly with death and the occult. He adorned his room with symbols of his newfound beliefs, including pentagrams and posters of his musical idols, which often portrayed demonic imagery. This obsession with the satanic was not merely a rebellious phase, but a foundational element of his distorted worldview, which rationalized and even sanctified acts of extreme violence. The transformation from a troubled youth into a notorious serial killer began in earnest when Ramirez dropped out of high school and moved to California. Los Angeles in the early 1980s was a city of stark contrasts, where opulent wealth existed alongside profound poverty, and it was in this landscape that Ramirez's darkest impulses flourished. He initially sustained himself through petty theft, but his crimes soon escalated in both violence and severity, driven by a toxic combination of drug addiction, an ingrained fascination with violence, and a profound belief in Satanism. The first known attack attributed to the Night Stalker occurred in June 1984, a brutal home invasion that left an elderly woman sexually assaulted and terribly beaten. This assault marked the beginning of a horrifying spree that would span over a year, each attack random, each more vicious than the last, and each carried out under the cover of night. Ramirez's method of operation was chilling in its lack of pattern and predictability. He targeted homes at random, his victims selected by opportunity rather than by design. He traversed through various neighborhoods, from the sun-drenched suburbs of Glendale to the bustling streets of San Francisco, each location a backdrop to his macabre performances. The Night Stalker's signature was the sheer brutality of his crimes and the satanic symbols he left behind, a diabolical calling card that stoked the fires of public and media frenzy. His use of different weapons, knives, handguns, even tire irons, added a layer of complexity that baffled law enforcement. But beyond the physical violence of his attacks, it was the psychological terror that imprinted his reign of terror on the collective consciousness of Southern California. Residents invested in new locks, security systems, and guard dogs. Neighborhood watch programs swelled in membership. Yet the randomness of Ramirez's attacks made them all the more terrifying, for no one could predict where the Night Stalker would strike next. The media coverage of the attacks was relentless, each new incident a headline that fed the growing mythos of the Night Stalker. With each report, the legend of this nocturnal predator grew, his shadow looming larger over a city already on edge. The fear was palpable, a shared nightmare that held the city in its grip, each sunset a reminder that nightfall could bring the Night Stalker to anyone's door. As summer yielded to fall in 1984, the Night Stalker's reign of terror showed no signs of abating. Richard Ramirez continued to evade capture, his face not yet known to law enforcement or the public, but his presence felt deeply and darkly in every corner of Southern California. The series of brutal attacks grew in frequency and ferocity, weaving a tapestry of fear that draped over the region. Ramirez, emboldened by his continued evasion of the authorities and fueled by a toxic concoction of drugs and delusional conviction, ventured further into his sadistic fantasies. His visits to homes throughout the Los Angeles area were marked by increasing cruelty and ritualistic overtones that became signatures of his assaults. The pentagrams drawn on walls and bodies of his victims were a chilling testament to his allegiance to dark forces. These symbols, drawn in lipstick or carved into flesh, were not just markers of terror, but also of defiance, a message to the world of his perceived invincibility. The randomness of Ramirez's crimes compounded the collective anxiety. No one felt safe. The victims varied widely in age, race, and socioeconomic status, shattering any hope of discerning a pattern or predicting his next move. He would sometimes strike multiple homes in a single night, only to disappear for several days, leaving communities on edge, bracing for his inevitable return. During this period, the media's portrayal of the Night Stalker evolved. Initial reports of a serial burglar and rapist morphed as the full horror of his actions became clear, culminating in the stark realization that Southern California was in the grip of a serial killer. News broadcasts filled the airwaves with advice on self-defense and home security, while the print media published composite sketches based on survivors' descriptions. These sketches, however, varied significantly, a testament to the chameleon-like nature Ramirez exhibited, altering his appearance, using different vehicles, and even changing his approach to entering homes. In one chilling episode, Ramirez broke into the home of a middle-aged couple in Monterey Park. The husband was shot immediately upon confrontation, a quick and brutal act. The wife, subjected to a nightmarish ordeal, survived but was left deeply traumatized, her account of the terror adding another layer to the growing legend of the Night Stalker. Her description of the assailant, a tall man with gaunt features, wide-spaced, rotting teeth, and cold, merciless eyes, added crucial details to the evolving profile of the killer. By now, the Los Angeles Police Department, under intense pressure to make progress, formed a dedicated task force. This team, composed of seasoned homicide detectives and forensic experts, began piecing together the disparate clues left behind at different crime scenes. Shoe prints, ballistic evidence, and critically fingerprints collected from various locations started to form a coherent, if incomplete, picture of the assailant. Yet Ramirez remained a phantom, slipping through the cracks of the dragnet with frustrating ease. It was his audacity, combined with a string of luck, that allowed Ramirez to continue his spree. He traveled extensively across Southern California, using stolen vehicles and changing his appearance frequently. His deep-seated belief in supernatural protection seemed to embolden him, leading him to take greater risks. In one audacious instance, he left a suburban home he had just violated, only to commit another assault a few blocks away, demonstrating a brazen disregard for law enforcement. As the investigation continued, the task force focused on the unique aspects of Ramirez's modus operandi. They noted the inconsistency in the choice of victims and the variety of neighborhoods targeted, but also recognized the recurring elements: the use of .22 caliber bullets, the specific type of knot used to tie up victims, and the satanic symbols. These elements, combined with emerging forensic technologies, slowly narrowed the field of investigation. The community response was one of fortitude, mixed with fear. Neighborhoods organized watch groups, and individuals took precautions that had seemed unnecessary only months before. Hardware stores reported a surge in sales of locks, security lights, and window bars. The psychological impact of the Night Stalker's crimes was profound, altering the very way residents lived their daily lives. Evening gatherings were curtailed, and once bustling streets grew quiet after dusk. Meanwhile, Ramirez's psychological state was unraveling under the weight of his addictions and the increasing pressure of his nomadic lifestyle. Yet his belief in his invincibility, fueled by his survival despite close calls and narrow escapes from potential capture, only deepened his resolve to continue his campaign of terror. This period of his spree was marked by a perverse mix of overconfidence and increasing desperation. A dangerous combination that promised more violence was to come. As 1985 dawned, the task force redoubled its efforts, aware that the killer they were hunting was not just a man, but a manifestation of pure evil, driven by dark forces that seemed incomprehensible to the average citizen. The stakes were higher than ever, and the race to stop the Night Stalker before he could strike again was both a professional mandate and a moral imperative. The winter of 1985 did little to cool the fervor of Ramirez's rampage. If anything, the colder nights seemed to bring with them an even darker turn in the Night Stalker's activities. He expanded his geographical range, venturing north beyond the San Fernando Valley, bringing his brand of terror to communities that had followed his atrocities in the media, never imagining they would be next. One particularly brutal encounter occurred in a quiet neighborhood of Santa Barbara. Breaking into the home of a young couple, Ramirez demonstrated a further escalation in violence. After incapacitating the husband, he subjected the wife to hours of unspeakable horror. The aftermath left even seasoned crime scene investigators shaken. The house was a macabre scene with symbols scrawled across the interior, a grotesque tableau that bore the unmistakable signature of the Night Stalker. This attack, while horrifying in its own right, provided crucial evidence that would later prove instrumental in linking Ramirez to multiple crime scenes across California. As Ramirez continued to elude capture, public pressure on law enforcement escalated. The media, ever watchful and increasingly critical, scrutinized every step of the investigation. The police were not only racing against the clock to prevent further atrocities, but were also battling against public doubt in their ability to capture the elusive killer. The task force, understanding that traditional methods of policing were insufficient, began to leverage emerging technologies of the time. Forensic science, particularly the analysis of DNA, was coming into its own, and though still in its early stages, provided the detectives with hope of a breakthrough. Additionally, the increased coordination between different police jurisdictions facilitated by the task force's efforts meant that data and insights were shared more rapidly, tightening the net around Ramirez. It was around this time that a breakthrough finally appeared in the form of an overlooked piece of evidence from one of the early crime scenes, a shoe print. This print, left in the soft earth of a victim's garden, was matched to a rare brand and size of shoe, traced to a limited batch sold in California. This detail, initially just another piece of the puzzle, became a key focus of the investigation. Detectives scoured sales records and interviewed store employees, slowly narrowing down the list of potential suspects who could have purchased such shoes. Parallel to the physical evidence, psychological profilers within the task force worked to get inside the mind of the Night Stalker. They analyzed his choice of victims and locations, his methods of entry and attack, and his increasingly bold signatures left at crime scenes. This profiling not only helped anticipate potential future actions, but also assisted in communicating to the public through press conferences the type of behavior and precautions to be aware of. As the net began to close, Ramirez, driven by a combination of paranoia and drug-induced psychosis, became even more unpredictable. His movements grew erratic, his selection of victims and locations more desperate. He ventured further afield, striking in areas where he had not previously been active, perhaps in an attempt to confuse law enforcement and scatter their resources. The tension between the public's growing awareness and Ramirez's increasing recklessness created a volatile atmosphere in Southern California. Every citizen became a watchman. Every shadow cast by the setting sun was scrutinized with suspicion and fear. The media's role in stoking this fear was undeniable, but it also played a crucial part in keeping the community alert and engaged in the manhunt. By the spring of 1985, the task force had compiled a detailed profile of the Night Stalker, and several promising leads were being pursued with vigor. Surveillance footage from a stolen car, recovered miles from the latest crime scene, offered the first grainy images of a suspect. These images, though low in quality, matched the physical descriptions provided by surviving victims. This phase of the investigation was characterized by a cat-and-mouse game between Ramirez and the police, with the public caught in the middle, simultaneously fearful and fascinated by the unfolding drama. The collective yearning for resolution grew stronger with each passing day, each new lead followed by the task force, and each night that fell upon Southern California, bringing with it both the hope for peace and the fear of darkness. As the sun set on another day in Southern California, the specter of the Night Stalker loomed large over the populace. The string of brutal attacks had woven a pervasive tapestry of fear that hung over every household. With each new crime reported, the anxiety deepened and the pressure mounted on law enforcement to bring the elusive predator to justice. The investigation had become a fixture of daily conversation, a continuous story unfolding in the newspapers and on television screens, with citizens clinging to every update, hoping for some news of an arrest. Richard Ramirez, meanwhile, continued his desperate flight from capture. Moving constantly, using stolen cars and altering his appearance, he slipped through the tightening net of the task force's surveillance. His mind, fueled by a cocktail of drugs and delusional beliefs, pushed him to continue his macabre mission, each act of violence a perverse tribute to the dark forces he worshipped. During this period, Ramirez ventured further afield, reaching into areas previously untouched by his reign of terror. One night, he drove north to San Francisco, seeking new ground to continue his series of horrific deeds. Here, he committed one of his most audacious acts yet, breaking into the home of an elderly couple. The brutality of the attack shocked even seasoned investigators when the bodies were discovered the following morning. Ramirez had left his signature pentagram at the scene, drawn in the victim's blood, alongside a taunting message scrawled on the wall, declaring his allegiance to Satan. Back in Los Angeles, the task force, now operating with an air of frenzied urgency, worked tirelessly. The small breakthroughs, like the identification of the rare shoe print and the grainy surveillance footage, had given them a faint trail to follow. The detectives pored over every scrap of evidence, mapping out Ramirez's possible routes and stops, attempting to predict his next move. The collaboration between various police departments had intensified, with information flowing more freely than ever before, creating a comprehensive picture of the Night Stalker's activities. Amidst the investigation, the media played an increasingly significant role. The press was relentless, their coverage wide and deep, feeding the public's fear but also aiding the police by keeping the Night Stalker's image and crimes in the public eye. Community meetings were held, with police officers advising residents on safety measures, reinforcing doors and windows, and maintaining a vigilant watch over their neighborhoods. The atmosphere was one of a city under siege, every citizen a soldier in a war against an unseen enemy. As spring turned into summer, the intensity of the search increased. The task force employed every available resource, from advanced forensic techniques to psychological profiling. The profilers had constructed a detailed psychological portrait of Ramirez, depicting a man driven by a complex web of motivations, including a desire for power, a need to instill fear, and a deeply ingrained reverence for satanic beliefs. This profile helped narrow the focus of the physical search, predicting potential targets and suggesting possible hideouts. Despite these efforts, Ramirez remained a step ahead, his actions becoming increasingly reckless as he sensed the noose tightening. In a bold move, he returned to Los Angeles, targeting a suburban home where he believed he would find easy prey. However, this time, something went wrong. The house was not as deserted as he had anticipated, and during the attack, he was startled by the unexpected arrival of a neighbor. In the ensuing chaos, Ramirez fled the scene, leaving behind crucial evidence that would soon lead to his downfall. This evidence included more detailed fingerprints and, critically, a vehicle description provided by the quick-thinking neighbor. The task force, reinvigorated by this new information, launched a full-scale operation to track down the vehicle, which led them to a garage where Ramirez had recently sought repairs. The garage owner, recalling the distinctive appearance and nervous demeanor of his recent customer, provided the police with the final piece of the puzzle: Ramirez's full name, obtained from a repair invoice. With Ramirez's identity finally known, the task force acted swiftly. They distributed his photograph and details to the media, sparking a massive public response. His face was plastered on every news channel and printed on the front page of every newspaper. The city, already on edge, was now alert to the presence of the monster who had walked among them. His anonymity stripped away, his options dwindling. This pivotal moment marked a dramatic shift in the hunt for the Night Stalker. The public, empowered with information and united in their desire to end the nightmare, became the eyes and ears of the task force. Tips flooded in, sightings were reported, and the net began to close around Ramirez, who found himself running not only from the police, but from every citizen who recognized his face. His time was running out, and the vast landscape of California, which had once offered him countless places to hide, had become a hostile environment, with danger lurking around every corner. As the summer heat intensified, so did the chase. Ramirez, driven by desperation, continued his flight, but the world had turned against him. Every shadow was a potential threat, every glance from a stranger a possible recognition. The psychological strain began to show, his movements more erratic, his decisions less calculated. The once confident predator was now the hunted, his sense of invulnerability shattered by the relentless pursuit. The community's role in this phase of the manhunt was unprecedented. Across the state, residents kept their eyes peeled, vigilant and ready to act. The media continued to amplify the urgency with constant updates and broadcasts of Ramirez's description and known aliases. It was during this high-tension period that a critical breakthrough occurred, stemming from the most mundane of errors on Ramirez's part. After attempting a carjacking in an East Los Angeles neighborhood, Ramirez was spotted and recognized by a group of residents. The sighting led to a chaotic chase through the streets, a palpable sense of community justice fueling the pursuit. People poured out of their homes, joining the chase, determined to capture the man who had terrorized their communities for over a year. Ramirez, exhausted and overwhelmed, attempted to steal a car to escape, but was thwarted by the growing crowd. In a dramatic confrontation, he was finally subdued by bystanders until the police arrived to make the arrest. The capture of Richard Ramirez was not just the culmination of an intense and exhaustive investigation by the police. It was a moment of collective catharsis for the community. The public had played a crucial role in his apprehension, a fact that was celebrated across the nation. His arrest not only marked the end of his reign of terror, but also demonstrated the power of a united community, acting in concert with law enforcement. Following his arrest, the full extent of Ramirez's crimes came to light during the trial. The courtroom was packed every day, the proceedings broadcast to millions, who followed every detail with a mixture of horror and fascination. Ramirez, with his chilling nonchalance and disturbing outbursts of satanic praise, became a grotesque celebrity. His trial offered a glimpse into the depths of human depravity, his numerous brutal crimes recounted in stark, painful detail by the surviving victims and the families of those he had murdered. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Forensic data, including fingerprints and DNA collected from crime scenes, along with the testimonies of survivors, painted a damning picture. Additionally, the recovered items from his hideouts and the consistent reports of his satanic symbols at crime scenes corroborated the image of a man driven by dark forces. Ramirez was found guilty on multiple counts of murder, rape, and burglary, receiving the death sentence. His conviction was a grim but necessary conclusion to a dark chapter in California's history. However, the legacy of his crimes lingered long in the public consciousness, a stark reminder of the fragility of safety and the potential for evil hidden within human nature. The psychological impact of the Night Stalker case had a lasting effect on law enforcement and the communities affected. It led to changes in how serial crimes were investigated, particularly the importance of interagency cooperation and the use of emerging technologies in forensic science. The case also heightened public awareness about community safety and the importance of vigilance. In the years that followed, the memory of the fear Ramirez instilled and the relief at his capture continued to resonate. Documentaries, books, and articles explored every facet of his spree and its aftermath, attempting to understand not just the how of his actions, but the why. The Night Stalker's saga became a cautionary tale about the depths of darkness that can exist in the human psyche and the light of community and justice that responds to it. Thus, as Southern California basked in the relief of Ramirez's capture and subsequent conviction, the scars left by his actions remained. These scars were not just physical, but deeply woven into the social and cultural fabric of the state, a reminder of when evil walked the streets and how a community rose to meet it, ultimately restoring peace through unity and resilience. The long shadow cast by Richard Ramirez, known infamously as the Night Stalker, stretched far beyond the walls of the courtroom, where he was tried and convicted. His capture and subsequent incarceration did not immediately dissolve the pervasive atmosphere of fear he had instilled across California. Instead, his trial became a focal point for a society grappling with the reality of the evil that had lurked undetected in its midst. Each day of the proceedings was a process of communal reckoning, with the public and media dissecting every detail, seeking to understand the incomprehensible. As Ramirez was led into the courtroom, the contrast between his slight frame and the heinous nature of his crimes struck all who observed him. With long, dark hair and a gaunt face, he bore the physical marks of his drug-riddled lifestyle. His demeanor in court was unsettlingly calm, often flashing a macabre grin that chilled the onlookers. His infamous outburst of "Hail Satan," complete with a flash of a pentagram drawn on his palm, only solidified his persona as the embodiment of a nightmare come to life. The proceedings detailed a litany of brutality that Ramirez had inflicted upon his victims. The testimonies from survivors and the forensic evidence presented painted a gruesome tableau of his year-long reign of terror. Each charge brought against him was supported by overwhelming evidence, from fingerprints to shoe prints, from stolen items found in his possession to the chilling, consistent reports of his satanic symbols left at crime scenes. Throughout the trial, the prosecution meticulously constructed a narrative of Ramirez's movements, linking him to each crime scene with precision. This methodical dismantling of his spree left little room for doubt about his guilt, yet the why behind his actions remained a haunting question that no amount of evidence seemed to fully answer. The defense, overwhelmed by the weight of the evidence, struggled to humanize Ramirez, suggesting his troubled upbringing and mental health issues as factors in his crimes. However, these arguments did little to mitigate the horror of his actions or the palpable anger and grief of the families of the victims. Outside the courtroom, the trial of Richard Ramirez sparked a broader societal debate about the nature of evil and the justice system's role in dealing with individuals who commit such incomprehensible crimes. Some argued for the death penalty as the only just response, while others advocated for life imprisonment, emphasizing rehabilitation and the moral implications of capital punishment. This debate often spilled over into the public sphere, playing out in news media, among advocacy groups, and within political debates, reflecting a society in moral conflict. Parallel to the legal and ethical debates, the Ramirez trial had a significant impact on law enforcement practices and public safety measures. It catalyzed improvements in forensic technology, particularly in the use of DNA and fingerprint analysis, which had been crucial in securing Ramirez's conviction. Law enforcement agencies across the country took note of the successes and failures of the Night Stalker investigation, leading to enhanced cooperation between different jurisdictions and improved methods of tracking and apprehending suspects. The psychological impact on the survivors and the families of the victims was profound and lasting. For many, the trial provided a form of closure, a chance to confront the man who had brought such darkness into their lives. Yet for others, the scars were too deep, the memories too painful for any verdict to heal fully. The community support groups and counseling services saw increased demand as those affected sought to find ways to move forward. In the broader cultural context, the saga of the Night Stalker became a grim reminder of the fragility of safety and the potential for darkness within the human soul. Books, documentaries, and later digital content explored every aspect of Ramirez's crimes and the societal conditions that allowed him to operate undetected for so long. These narratives, while providing insight and analysis, also served as a form of collective processing of the trauma. Years passed, and the memory of the Night Stalker's reign of terror shifted from immediate horror to a dark chapter in the history of California. Richard Ramirez himself became a macabre figure of fascination in popular culture, emblematic of the extreme manifestations of human depravity. His death in 2013 from natural causes while on death row did little to diminish the public's fascination with his case, which continued to be studied and discussed as a profound and disturbing phenomenon. Reflecting on the legacy of Richard Ramirez's spree forces a confrontation with uncomfortable truths about society's underbelly and the capacity for human cruelty. It also highlights the resilience of communities that, when tested by unimaginable horrors, responded with unity and determination. The collective effort to capture and prosecute the Night Stalker reaffirmed faith in the justice system, despite its imperfections, and underscored the essential role of community vigilance and cooperation in maintaining safety. As the sun sets over California, now decades removed from those dark times, the lessons remain ingrained in the societal consciousness. The story of the Night Stalker serves as a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the need for awareness and preparedness in the face of evil. It underscores the reality that such darkness can emerge from the shadows unexpectedly, challenging the norms of society and the effectiveness of its protective measures. This awareness prompts continuous advancements in law enforcement techniques, community engagement strategies, and the overall approach to public safety, ensuring that communities are better equipped to prevent or respond to similar threats.
The saga of the Night Stalker also leaves a legacy of strengthened community bonds. In the wake of Ramirez's terror, neighborhoods that had once been merely geographical locations transformed into tight-knit communities. Residents come together to relieve these camps, continue to cultivate a spirit of cooperation and vigilance. The neighborhood watch program and community safety initiatives were good. These efforts have fostered a sense of responsibility among community members to look out for one another, reinforcing the notion of vigilance and the powerful deterrent of crime.
Educationally, the case has become a staple in criminal justice curriculums, taught as a comprehensive study on serial crime investigation, forensic science, and the psychology of criminal behavior. Through these academic discussions, future law enforcement officers, psychologists, and criminologists examine the complexities of such cases. They explore not only the forensic and investigative challenges, but also the societal impacts and the ethical dilemmas posed by capital punishment and the treatment of mentally ill offenders. Moreover, the extensive media coverage and public fascination with the Night Stalker have sparked important conversations about the portrayal of criminals in the media. The sensationalism often associated with such coverage has been critiqued for potentially glamorizing perpetrators while overshadowing the victim's suffering. This scrutiny has led to more thoughtful approaches in journalism and media production, emphasizing respectful and sensitive treatment of crime stories, focusing on victim advocacy and the broader implications of crime on society. Mental health awareness has also seen significant growth due to the discussions around Ramirez's psychological state. The recognition of his severe mental disorders has not excused his actions, but has prompted broader discussions on the importance of mental health support and early intervention. It has highlighted the critical need for a robust mental health infrastructure capable of preventing such extreme manifestations of untreated mental illness. The continued public interest in true crime stories like that of the Night Stalker reflects an ongoing fascination with the darker aspects of human nature. It also serves a functional purpose, enabling society to explore and understand the depths of human behavior, the failings of social systems, and the redemptive power of justice and resilience. This engagement with true crime narratives allows individuals to process fear and trauma in a controlled environment, leading to better preparedness and a more informed public. As the narrative of Richard Ramirez fades into history, the lessons gleaned from his dreadful spree remain relevant. They remind us of the ever-present need for empathy, vigilance, and a proactive stance against threats to public safety. The story of the Night Stalker is not just a chronicle of evil and fear, it is also a testament to the strength and resolve of those who stand against darkness, advocating for justice and security in an unpredictable world. Through this lens, the legacy of the Night Stalker's reign of terror is not only about the pain and fear he inflicted, but also about the enduring spirit of community and the continuous quest for a safer society. Thank you for joining me on this harrowing journey through the dark heart of one of history's most notorious criminals, Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. As we close this chapter, let's reflect on the strength and resilience demonstrated by the communities affected and the law enforcement officers dedicated to bringing Ramirez to justice. Remember, the stories we share here on Whispers of the Guilty are more than tales of crime and punishment. They are reminders of our collective capacity to overcome fear, to unite in the face of danger, and to ensure that justice prevails. If today's episode has intrigued or moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to stay updated with our latest uploads. Share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from you. What did you find most chilling about the Night Stalker's story? What would you like to explore in our next episode? Until next time, this is Silence, reminding you to stay vigilant and keep the dialogue going. Evil thrives in silence, so let's keep the whispers loud. Stay safe, everyone, and take care.